Yes, I think we can resume our meeting. Mr. Lam, you were asking them the question regarding, cost difficulties. I think they've already explained that point in the paper. That is, if the athlete understands that Mr. Wong, why don't you let Mr. Wong explain? I'm just saying that they've actually covered this point in the paper. I don't think you were using the term trouble or problem. Yeah, he did use those two words. If I've used the wrong terminology, then I would like to say sorry to members. I think members may refer to Table 5. I think we've already explained that under Note 1. That is, the information, whether the information provided are useful. If members find such information useful, of course we would be happy to provide such information. I don't think this explains the point about, the term trouble that he said. I think you can withdraw that if you like. Withdraw that point. Yeah. I think under Note 1, I think they say that this actually, is to their advantage. It said it is particularly useful. Chairman, if you're referring to Note 1, I would like to ask him to further clarify. If you say it would not be particularly useful, I wouldn't understand that. For an athlete, he can apply to become actually a CAT scholarship for the Cat C, elite athlete. That's his decision to apply or not. But if you have to consider what the eligibility qualification for scholarship as one of the criteria for selection, why is it that this is not useful to the athletes? I mean that the athlete could come from a very rich background. He may not need the scholarship after all. He might want to give the chance to his peers. But that's not the case. You're telling us that you have to take this factor into consideration. In that case, he would apply it anyway, even if he doesn't need it. So how should we interpret the phrase of no particular use? I think we've already resumed our meeting. I'd like to allow Mr. Wong to continue with his explanation. And what is the meaning of no particular use? I think, in our opinion, it is the objective to make the best time. We've never thought that. I mean, they would apply anyway for financial reasons. Perhaps I need to go back and take a look and see whether or not I can, do a bit more and find out whether the coaches know and whether the athletes know about the SI scholarship. I'll make inquiries when I go back. Mr. Wong and Mr. Chang, you've heard all the questions I put to you this morning until now. You still have the opinion that not disclosing the selection criteria to the athletes is fair to the athletes. Is that right? Or is it that with hindsight, this is not fair to the athletes? Mr. Wong, Mr. Chang? I'll give the two of you another chance. You said you want to withdraw the statement and the term 麻煩 or trouble. I'd like you to, give you one more chance to tell us whether you think this is fair to the athletes. Perhaps you can, make reference to the BRP. I think everything we have to go back to the origin, and that is the BRP promulgated by the ICAC in 2011. Mr. Chang. To answer Mr. Lam's question, we believe that this is not desirable, and that's why we have accepted the Director of Audit's recommendation. Going forward, all all our selection criteria and the selection process and the results will be, will be immediately dismissed or announced on disclosed online. Are you going to withdraw your earlier statement that not disclosing the selection criteria is fair? Well, you've already explained what you've done in the past, and that you have agreed with the recommendation of the Director of Audit, right? And I think he needs to, I'm giving him the chance to withdraw that earlier statement. Well, in other words, the statement will therefore still stand, right? It's still effective. Kenneth, thank you. Well, I'll put my question slowly. For the 100-meter breaststroke event, what is the time for the qualifying time for A and B category? Do you have such information? Well, sometimes the time, we'll look at the latest figure. The International Swimming Association will publish the latest results of international events. They will give a grading how many, what would qualify as A time and B time. I'd like Mr. Wong to give us a paper. That is, what is the most updated A time and B time. I also like to go back to case A and the selection criteria and corporate governance. These are the two important areas covered by the report. I'd like to ask questions about case 1. Now, first of all, for the selection committee, is it for every major international event? It would be, do you have the same selection committee, or do you have a selection committee for the Olympic Games, another one for the Asian Games, and so on? Say, for the Asian Games, the Olympic Games, and the All Nations Games, do we have the same selection committee for 3? No, they're different. The All Nations Games is not within our ambit. It's actually, the responsibility of the government. For all the international multi-sports events, it would depend how many events there are in such games. And and then we will approach the NSAs. So for Olympics, Asian Games, Indoor Games are all different. Understood. Let's not talk about the multi-games events. Let's talk about a single event like the International Swimming Championship event. Will there be, an SFOC selection committee? We do not participate in the single event games. We would only participate in the multi-sports games. So does the selection committee have a constitution stipulating how many people will be on that committee? Whom do the members of the committee represent? Is there a constitution, stipulating the composition of the committee? Basically, it would be the NSAs which participate in those games involved. It will be representatives of those NSAs. So for a particular game, there are 20 items and we have 17, 18, then we invite them to sit on the committee. So is it that the IOC has delegated the authority to you, and based on that you would exercise your authority? Yes. Our board will endorse, make the decision. So you have a charter that is the government will not intervene with your operations, right? It's not that it's not just about the decision being yours, but you have to also explain the origin of your authority. Yes. Actually, For all the Olympic sports, NSA, they are members. Some are also NSAs which take part in the Asian Games. They also are members. Okay, I'll let Mr. Wong to further clarify this point. Say for a particular sports, let's say there are 15 events for a particular game, then you would approach 15 NSAs to send representatives to form the selection committee. Is that the principle? And also, can you tell us whether this principle is compatible with the ISC charter? I think most of the members of the selection committee, I think for some minor sports, normally we would require them to make sure that they be familiar with the selection criteria. For some of the new sports, like, parachuting and so on, then we may not invite them to sit on the board. But when it comes to the particular sport, we will invite the representatives to attend.
Now, here's my question. After its members receive the invitation to sit on the committee, is there a part that requires a declaration of interest? I heard from Mr. Wong just then that, say, for HKASA, that's where Mr. Wong comes from. For the selection of swimmers, Mr. Wong will recuse himself from the selection of swimmers. Is that the only mechanism in place currently for preventing conflict of interest? For board members, I'm not talking about board members, I am talking about selection committee. Yes, for selection committee, every member of the selection committee has to fill out this declaration of interest form. What do you have to declare? You say you have to declare something like the son of a board member or a nephew of the member, maybe have to do with the member. Do you have to declare that, or maybe pecuniary interest, as in the case of the Legislative Council? Or do you have to declare something like the next of kin relatives and stuff like that? Can you show us a copy of that declaration form? Briefly, we have simple forms. It's not as detailed as Mr. Lam was mentioning. It's up to the member to declare whether that member has anything to do with an organization on a certain company that has to do with the sort. Do you have like a document on declaration of interest? Because it appears that there's a two-tier declaration system. At one level, you have to declare your affiliations with different associations. And then tier 2 kicks in when you have to do the voting. It's like a two-level declaration. Do you have anything of that? Could you give us a copy of that? Mr. Chang, can you... In this report, for paragraph 4.20, there is an enhancement practice that's referenced in that paragraph, 4.20. There's something on conflict of interest, financial interest. There was a mechanism in place regarding declaration of interest. I'm not talking about the enhancement measure. I'm talking about what you currently have in place. It's not about the enhancement practice. You can have anything in enhancement practice. First, I need to look at the declaration form. That's the first point. Second, do you have any guidelines in the declaration form so that members can read and they can know what they're really declaring? These are 2 points. Chair, we are talking about the enhancement practice. That practice has already been put in place, and we will show the Legislative Council later on. When was this enhancement practice put in place? The date when the practice was put in place was in 2003. Mr. Chang? The enhancement practice was put in place in January 2013. Yeah, we just need to look at the document. So we're saying this was put in place in January 2013. Another question about selection criterion. In case 1, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, Mr. Lam asked you a number of questions on this case. For 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, the NSAs are aware of these criteria. So do these criteria apply to all multi-sports games like track items, swimming, or maybe judo, I don't know. Maybe track events, rowing. Are all these events governed by the same criteria here, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D, Mr. Wong? Yes, I can confirm that. Another point, Chair. Mr. Wong was saying that the requirements set out in 1A, B, C, and D are something that the NSAs would pass on to the relevant cultures. Is this true? Second, for selection committee or the Olympic Committee, has the SFOC asked the NSAs not to disclose these, or has they asked the coaches to pass on the information? We will not ask the NSAs to withhold certain information. These NSAs are free to pass on the information to the coaches and athletes. Mr. Wong, you just said that you would pass on the information to Mr. Lam Chok-ting. The instructions, for example, or the information about this. Yes, I will provide the information. For participation in international sports events, there has been a long history in Hong Kong. From the for Rome, Olympics in Rome, Tokyo, Hong Kong has been taking part in these games for a long time. I think the selection process has been in place for a long time. Has there been any case in which any athlete or any NSAs filed a judicial review case against this process? As far as I'm aware, no. Can you give us a written reply to confirm this matter? Second point. For the appeals mechanism, specifically, what is that mechanism like? For example, Chair, here's what I want to know. You need an appeal panel for the appeal mechanism. What are the members? How do you select the committees to sit on the appeal panel? What's the tenure of the appeal panel, Mr. Wong? There are two parts to the appeal mechanism. The first part, now if the selection committee produces a name list and a particular NSA wants to make changes to that list, want to make replacements, for example, the NSA will write to us, so the selection committee will review the documents submitted by the NSAs. If the selection committee does not find the documents, if the NSA is not happy with the result, then they can apply to the appeal panel. So our president sits on the appeal panel and will review the case. And the appeal panel will also have other members sitting on it. The appeal panel, this is one person. You have two more members. How do you select those members, and what's the term? What's the tenure? Do you have an appeal panel in place, or do you set up one in response to special cases? How are these two other officers selected? In Note 12, for the International Multi-Sports Games, appeal panel is spelled out. And every time when there's an annual meeting, the board will recommend 4 to 6 people on the list to be passed at the annual meeting. For the 4 to 6 members, they will sit on that for 4 years. The president of the S7OC will sit as the chair of the appeal panel. And then the president will choose 2 members based on whether they're available for the panel and with conflicts of interest and stuff. And for me, I am the secretary of that appeal panel. can you show us a previous case? So, like a case from the hearings of the appeal panel. Maybe the most recent ones. I don't know when that was. Do you have any record of such hearings? We would try to dig up the information. Or have you never had any appeal cases? Or just give us the latest case. Chair, one thing to add from me. In 2018, at the meeting of the Home Affairs Bureau, a question was raised and we provided information. We have never had this. We never had a hearing of the appeal panel. Never say never ever. Never. Yes. No, correct. Chairman, we've never had a hearing. And that's why this panel has nothing to do. For case 1, Chair, for the selection criteria, for 1C, consideration will be given to performance of athletes, the best performance in nominated events in years 2014 to 2018. For different sports events, you have different games. For swimming events, what games are we talking about by the nominated events for swimming? Mr. Wong. Take Olympic Games as an example, the International Swimming Federation or the ISF. There have been selection trials. Then there has to be something about the international judges. That's for the swimming. As for the other games, I think that may vary from sport to sport. For swimming, I want to focus on swimming. Do you have a name list containing all these nominated events? So for the World Championship in swimming at different legs, do you have a list for swimming events? Yes, we do have that. We have a list approved by the International Swimming Federation. For this list, are the swimming athletes aware of such a list? Another thing. For individual swimming events, they may be considered to be nominated events. As for the Asian games like the Asian Games, swimming events at Hong Kong level, or the other games in recent years, we consider those to be nominated events. Do you have a list showing all these nominated events? Yes. For 1D, NSA's preparation plans for athletes. A question for the HKASA. Now, since Mr. Wong, you represent the HKASA here. The 18th Asian Games, for example, 6 months before the 18th Asian Games, what kind of preparation was there? Was there anything like nomination competitions? Was there any document providing all this information to those who may wish to take part in the Asian Games? For the preparation part of it, the head coach is responsible for implementing the preparation work. So the head coach may take the athletes to different games, international games. It's something we have to check with the HKSI for the information. Question concerning athlete A and athlete B. Athlete B was selected because there was a new item 4x100-meter mixed medley. Are you talking about a team composed of male and female swimmers? That's a new item. Is there any specification of whether a certain leg, a certain style has to be done by a male swimmer and a female swimmer? Or do you just pick 2 female swimmers and 2 male swimmers? Or this is up to you? Yes, this is. So it's up to you. it's up to the region to decide. Then why is it that we had this vacancy for 100-meter butterfly? You're saying it's a mixed event. You could have chosen a female swimmer. Why did you pick a male swimmer in the belief that he would achieve a better result, Mr. Wang? I don't have the information at hand. I also requested, could you give me the finalized name list of athletes for the 4x100-meter mixed medley? I need the results of the achievements of these athletes, sectional results, ranking, the final result of these athletes. Yes, I can do that. For athlete A, Mr. Lam Chak-ting put a lot of questions to you concerning athlete A just then. For athlete A, what was the result of his participation during the Asian Games for the breast style? Mr. Chang, do you have the information? Mr. Chang, you have the information. For athlete A, he did the 50-meter breaststroke leg. In the preliminary round, he came 6th. The preliminary round 6th. But overall, out of the 36 participants, he was at 19th in terms of time. That's poor result. For the selection criteria, 1A, it says that the athlete has to rank the first or the 8th in world events. Are we only talking about do they only allow 24 participants? But then you said you had 36 participants. I'm not sure what you mean by the top 1/3 out of 24 swimmers or 26 swimmers. Chair, during the selection, the results hand submitted by the NSAs were the results from 2017. Out of 34 participants, the athlete came 12th. So that was he almost made it to the top 1/3. So he didn't quite qualify for 1A. So we could only give him consideration under 1C. And as for his results at Asian Games, out of 36 contestants, he came to 19th. That's like 50th quarter. It's like half of it. So maybe the swimmers at the Asian Games are better than those at the Asian Indoor and Martial Arts Games. So for the top 1/3 ranking requirement, where does this requirement come from? You're saying the first 8th requirement, that's clear. Are you talking of 24 participants? It makes sense. Well, if the top 8 out of 24 would be the top 1/3, but then you have this top 1/3 requirement. Who set this requirement? What's the source for this requirement about being in the top 1/3? For the top 1/3 requirement, it has been a long time in existence. We have been going by this requirement for a long time. Has there any document showing that this requirement has been in place for a long time? It does not seem consistent with what you have in 1A. 1A governs the first 8 ranking from 1st to 8th in the international games. For Olympic Games and Asian Games, if we're just talking about a swimming event, the most popular ones like the first 100-meter freestyle, how many swimmers actually compete in those games? Could you just enlighten me on this? For Olympic Games, for 100-meter freestyle, how many swimmers will be selected to take part? Do we have 48, 36, 96? How do you arrive at the number of participants? Mr. Chang or Mr. Wang? It depends on the decision of the organizing committee for that particular sports event. For Asian Games, Hong Kong can send up to 2 participants. As for the question from Mr. Leung, the selection criterion. It's criterion written in English. There's this part saying on condition that
an athlete ranked 1/3 or above of the total number of participants。
呢個喺正一嘅 Appendix 3。
係啦，咁其實
So for this principle, our understanding is we need enough participants taking part in the game. If there are only 8 participants in a game and someone becomes the second run-up, and that we don't want to send someone like that to the game. That's why in 1A we have this stringent requirement in place. Mr. Chang, you're saying that you have 2 spots for each participating region. Did I hear it right, Mr. Chang? Yes. For each event, the region can send 2 participants. For each country or region, they can send 2 participants. So how many participants do we have? For 100-meter freestyle, breast style, 100 meters breast style, the selection committee failed to select any suitable athlete for 100-meter breaststroke. That's why the head coach made a decision for 100-meter breast style. They picked 2 participants who were relatively good at it.
Do you mean there was a time trial for the 2 athletes for selection? Was it done before the selection, or did you just check the records? What about the arrangement by the head coach? What exactly did it entail? So didn't you reach all the selection criteria? Because you have 2 participants to take part in a world or international game, and then you said that the criteria were not met, and out of the 2 participants, you only allowed 1 to go. Not only the top tier, but the second, third tier athletes could also take part in international games to gain exposure. At least this is the most important. You can't say, well, because they don't meet the selection criteria, we're only going to pick 1 out of the 2 because you're funded by the government. On the 23rd of August, the Hong Kong ASA issued a statement. How about if I read it out? Sure. In the second paragraph, it says that because the SFNOC did not accept Mr. Kwok and Mr. Yang, the 2 athletes' nomination for 100-meter breaststroke, according to the statement, to avoid wasting the 2 quotas for the international games, we consider the list of athletes. Originally, an athlete Yang would be arranged to take part in a 200-meter breaststroke, and also Mr. Mok to take part in the freestyle relay. However, because of the 2 games taking place in the same day, having considered athlete Mok's participation in the personal 4x100-meter freestyle game, the coach then picked to substitute his place. In other words, we have athletes Yang and for the games. That's from the HKASA. However, in the end, that participant did not take part in the 100-meter but rather 50-meter game because of other arrangements. So was the arrangement made that day? According to the HKASA, it was the head coach's decision. When was it made? For the preliminary, for 100 meters. When exactly did it take place? Date and time, and what about the timetable for the Asian Games? When was it announced? Do you have the information? If not, you can supplement the information later. Yes. And about the head coach altering the arrangement, when exactly did it take place? Date and time? What time, or at least which date? Tell us. Yes, we can provide this information later. How many meetings did the select committee have on the matter? because I think for the select committee's meetings, you will not only focus on swimming events. So how many days of meetings did the select committee have? Again, information later. Date, time of meeting, how many meetings, and also how decisions were made, when were they made, date and time, again, information, please. Yes, we'll provide this information in one go later. Another question. I don't know the meeting dates, but on the date of meeting, did you have the Asian Games swimming events timetable ready? And also, was there any change to the timetable? If there was any, and when was the change made? Well, I need to explain, Chairman. Say, I booked the tickets for the swimming events this year. 2 years ago, I was already given the program, the date and time of events, and I specifically asked for the Hong Kong delegation's games. And it's impossible to change times. It's Asian Games. I booked my tickets. Yes, go back and dig out information. I need more information to ask further questions, so nothing from me for the time being. Paul. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on a number of questions. First, on BPR, the report seems to check whether the SF and OC have complied with the best practices in the BPR. On a lower level, in fact, just from another perspective, we have NSAs under the SF and OC. Originally, the BPR should also apply to NSAs. So I want to know whether the SF and OC or the Audit Commission conducted any assessment on the BPR and the compliance by NSAs, because the BPR was supposed to be followed by the NSAs in the first place. Director. Thank you. As we point out in this report, we don't see a mechanism for the SF and OC to oversee and check for compliance of the BPR by NSAs. Say if we do not comply with the Olympic Charter, there are a number of aspects on transparency and governance. We find there is no such mechanism of oversight, and we've made the recommendation for the SF and OC to establish such a mechanism to monitor their members, namely the NSAs, and check for compliance. Because the mechanism originally should be designed for the purpose of NSA's compliance of the BPR. SF and OC seems to be on a higher level, but of course both levels should comply with the BPR. So from this study, I think we have identified a major loophole. If we don't have a good foundation at the lower level, then at the top level, we can only expect half of the job done. Because if the HKASA did not comply with the BPR, you only get second-hand information at the level of SF and OC. You may not have full information. Am I correct to say that? Regarding the relationship between NSAs and the SF and OC, all along we give them autonomy without much interference. But all along, incidents have happened. And after all, the NSAs and SF and OC receive government subvention. So to a certain extent, we have the responsibility of overseeing NSAs. it is quite limited as to what we can do, but very often we have very good liaison with NSAs. But of course, there is much more left to be desired, and on the problems pointed out by the Audit Commission, the HAB would like us to play a bigger part in overseeing and governing NSAs. You've asked a very good question. Say, Mr. Wong, take you as an example. Now, you are president of the HKASA. You're also involved in the SFNOC. It seems that it's an insider's game after all. This is the perception. And then at the level of the appeal, you have 2 members and also the chairman. So it seems that it's from the same circle. It's not quite healthy. Am I right? We do feel that there is much room for improvement. Despite the established practices, we need to improve things. On the appeal mechanism, about picking 2 out of 4 or 5 members, etc. That's also the question. Well, in fact, this is non-existent because we have never convened an appeal panel meeting. Is it because everybody believes this is black box operation, that it's just a waste of time to launch any appeal, or is it a matter of funding? Because after all, athletes in Hong Kong are not as wealthy as athletes elsewhere. They may find it difficult to engage or to commission a lawyer to file an appeal. Coming back to my point, you mentioned that you try to respect the autonomy of NSAs. I do understand that. But you also have the responsibility of oversight. And in fact, previously, you also criticized some NSA. I won't disclose the name. And in fact, the membership had been suspended for 2 years. Or at least you barred the NSA from taking part in the selection process. Is it because of excessive mutual respect and cooperation that you'd rather compromise the impartiality of the selection process? Say, in the sports sector, if there is a complaint from a coach, an athlete, or an NSA, of course, if we receive such a complaint, we will refer it to the NSA. However, if this is left unresolved, like the case cited by Mr. Chair just now, in fact, we continue to receive complaints from the athletes and the relatives of athletes, and eventually we opened a file to handle the matter. It's rather preemptive to deal with that at the outset, so we would prefer to give a chance for the NSA to explain first, so that with deeper understanding we can also follow up on the matter. We can either suspend or cancel the membership, or in terms of picking athletes to join a delegation, there are ways for us to stop them from taking part in the process. The SFNOC can nominate directly. So it's a rather anxious affair for the NSAs. 2 years ago, exactly because of that, we made that move. We followed up on the NSAs very closely because we have a membership committee and we do receive complaints in this regard, and we would review each and every case. Well, as the Chinese saying goes, you need to get the top leaders right, but I think the reverse also applies. You need to have a good foundation at the bottom. So if you do not build a good foundation, if you have injustice already happening at the bottom level, it may take a very long time for you to rectify the problem. By that time, it may be too late. Do you agree? Mr. Wong. First of all, we need to give an opportunity for the NSA to explain and rectify their mistake, if any. And if they fail to do that, and only if they fail to do that would we act. I think this is a necessary step. We cannot directly jump into any complaint without investigation and impose sanctions. I think this would be unfair to the NSA. Well, I understand the fair handling of the matter, as Mr. Wong put it. However, no matter how diligent you are in observing the 29 best practices in the ICAC's guidelines, if the NSAs themselves do not follow the BPR, actually drawn up for their sake, then no matter how hard you try, there will still be unfairness, and it is undesirable, Mr. Wong. This is exactly why the Home Affairs Bureau would like us to be more proactive. With more government funding, we can review the practices of all 79 NSAs and set up a mechanism of governance applicable to all of them, and also to standardize them, include them in all the articles of associations. Once this is standardized, it will be conducive to our fulfilling our responsibility and to improving the governance. So, Mr. Wong, please enlighten me. Has this been done, or when are you going to do it? Our work has started. Now, we have been discussing this with the Home Affairs Bureau. There are resource implications. We have professionals familiar with corporate governance, etc. So with a 5-year additional funding, we can increase the clout of our team to oversee and review the 79 NSAs. Mr. Chang would like to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. About membership affairs and enhancing the governance of NSAs starting from 2017, we have been collaborating with the Home Affairs Department and the Hong Kong Institute of Directors and on corporate governance for NSAs, including the director's responsibility and other seminars, and also financial knowledge. And through the series of seminars, the board of directors or board of members and the NSAs themselves will have a stronger knowledge on the roles they should play with a view to enhancing corporate governance of NSAs. We also have other thematic talks and workshops for NSAs on, say, eliminating discrimination and sexual harassment, and also protection of privacy in the sports sector. Secretary. If you're going to initiate a study, you need to have certain basis. For example, the company's ordinance. Well, but then you have only members of your own. You don't have external members. It's a small circle. It's the same as what is happening with Ocean Park. You must give instructions to a consultant to conduct a study. So what would the study about? If it's about governance, is it about the form, and what about composition? Any idea how this should be proceeded with? Chairman, are you talking about the additional funding? Yes, $5 million for improvement. But how? Improving your authority of oversight or what? Mr. Young, Commissioner, can give you more details. Yes, funding has been earmarked for a team to be set up. This will be a full-time team for conducting the review. We will recruit manpower externally, not by appointment. That is why we need a full-time team to review the articles of associations of NSAs and their implementation. So do you have any idea who will sit on the board or the team? We have not started the recruitment process. Funding has been earmarked. The SF and OC will draw up a plan, including the talents to be recruited, the necessary qualifications, and they will submit the plan for us to us for approval. Chairman, we have two Abrahams here. Well, I thank them for telling us the training you provided to NSAs. It seems that things are quite general. Responsibilities of a director, how to run an NSA, anti-discrimination, privacy protection. All these are good. But this morning, the crux of the meeting is about fairness and impartiality of the selection process. And we have our eyes on the BPR drawn up by the ICAC. So in order to eliminate injustice in the selection process, you need to make things right as soon as possible. As long as you ask the NSAs to follow the BPR, you will not accept their nominations. If you do that, this can be done very quickly. What's the difficulty?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think all along we have been doing this already. For example, we already have a plan. We have a committee which is planning to hire independent persons to lead the team, a team of full-time staff to do this. So, for example, how we can improve the corporate governance of NSAs and how the selection process could be, how we can ensure the fairness in the selection process. The plan is already in place. Once funding is approved, we will start to recruit people. Before each and every NSA can comply with the requirements of the best practice reference, the SFOC, will you I think in the past you have been very passive in monitoring the NSAs. Will you now be more proactive and actually check whether or not they have complied with, at least, if not all, but at least they should comply with all the main directions of the requirements before you accept the nominations? Definitely we will, for the selection criteria for the preliminary selection by the NSA and then the nomination being submitted to the SFOC and also the appeals mechanism, how we can enhance transparency in those areas. This is something which we will do. Mr. Kenneth Leung also asked a question regarding the appeal mechanism, and we found out that the appeal mechanism actually has never been used at all. You also refer to the review mechanism. Now, for the initial selection and the review mechanism, how do they operate? I think when there is a demand for appeal, it would have to be requested by the, NSA, and then we would, and if we agree, then they will send us the details, and we'll ask them to submit whatever grounds or justifications they have for the appeal, and then we'll convene a meeting, or if there are no particular views, then we will either accept or reject their views. If we were to uphold the original decision, and if the appellant still wants to, appeal, we will still entertain, the request for appeal, and we'll ask the president to actually ask the appeal board members to meet. Unfortunately, this has never been done. We never had such appeals. We do have this mechanism. Everybody knows about it. Now, for your review mechanism, are there established procedures and everybody knows about it? Or is it that, like you said, if somebody writes a letter, write in, and then you will take a look at it? So what is the time limit? Who is responsible for the review? What sort of evidence will be required? And who makes the decision? Are there any written rules, concerning the mechanism? Definitely we have written, we would notify the NSAs that they can actually lodge appeals according to the mechanism by written notice. Now, if there is a mechanism, then there should be a procedure. In that written notice, do you also explain details regarding the selection process and the appeal procedure? And if so, when were they formulated? And if so, have you announced it publicly? And also, in the past, how many times had such a review procedure been undertaken? I think we have had many reviews in the past. As for details relating to the procedure, Mr. Chen can further supplement. Now, the question asked a question regarding our appeal. Actually, there is no limit to the number of reviews, on condition that the appellant will have to submit new evidence, as we say in 1C, or the coach or the NSA, whether or not this particular event is the main focus of the future development, or are there special tailor-made training for the athlete? Once we receive the relevant documents, and if timing is tight, we will circulate them to all the members of the selection committee, and if we have enough time, we will convene a review committee meeting. Once a decision is made, we will notify the NSA. The NSA will relay that to the athlete concerned, and if there is new evidence, they can submit them again to us. Well, it would appear, according to Mr. Chang, that this is a very effective procedure. But do you have anything in writing so that all the NSA will know about this procedure, or only some of your buddies or only the insiders will know that they are entitled to repeated, applications for review? Actually, that review procedure it's actually public information. They are all laid down in our articles of association and rules, and we'll also upload that onto our website in future. Do you have them now, or will they will be available in the future? In our correspondence with NSAs, including the selection criteria, we do cover that. What about for K1? Do you have such information? I mean, for the whole case, so that we can have all the details. In case 1, 3 athletes apply for a review, and the review committee, having read all the claims, decided to uphold the original decision. There were other Asian game events, not swimming, which upon submission of new information for the committee approved the review. Now, regarding case 1, Mr. Chang mentioned a term review committee. Earlier, it would appear that they are the same people as the appeal committee. If they have time, they will meet. If not, then you do things by circulation. So what exactly, when is the committee the review committee? When is it the selection committee? Chairman. I think they are the same people. The first time when they make the selection decision, they are called the selection committee. After we have the membership of the selection committee, And whenever you have applications submitted by the NSA, they would be called reviews, and it would still be Mr. Wong being the chairman, and we have the same members. If Mr. Wong cannot chair the meeting, who will do that? Well, it's a review procedure for the NSAs to appeal to ask for a review, but they subject to the submitting new information, and the whole board will look at the case. For this review procedure, is it that individual athletes can request for a review, or is it not true? And that only if the NSA can apply for the review can they do that. Normally it would be the NSA. So are you saying that if the NSA itself does not agree with that review procedure, then they have the authority to veto or refuse the athletes the request for appeal on the ground of injustice? That would rest with the individual NSA's concern, as we will see whether or not they have any fresh evidence that they can submit to us. In some other countries, whether you talk about the appeal mechanism or the review procedure, they would normally be very transparent. And also there would be resources available to the athletes to help them with their appeal. Would you consider adopting that direction so that we can have more transparency and that there won't be any there will be fewer allegations of your operating within a black box? Anything that can help improve our selection mechanism and enhance transparency, we would accept that. But in some cases, but sometimes timing is of the essence, and we may need to submit nominations within a specified timetable to the IOC or the Asian Olympics Committee. So it normally would be within 1 or 2 weeks. So if we have to go through legal procedure, I don't know whether that would be viable, but we can certainly consider, various possible procedures. I understand that all of you are volunteers and people who are interested in sports, but since you hold so much of public resources and athletes would like to cherish every opportunity they can attend these games, I hope that you can convene meetings more frequently and be more diligent. I asked several questions earlier, for example, looking at case 1. Mr. Lim Chek Ting already asked a detailed question regarding criteria under one ABCD on page 1, one of which is whether the athlete will be entitled to the HACSI, TSC scholarship. But such criteria had not been, made public to the athletes, and I would take it that it was, wrong slip of the tongue, saying that doing that may cause problems. Besides that, or putting that all that aside, as a responsible organization, do you think there is a case that for any athletes who feel aggrieved, have you done your level best to ensure that all athletes are entitled to a fair selection procedure? As far as we're concerned, we hope to be able to be fair to each and every athlete. There is no reason for us to cause any athlete to feel aggrieved, because athletes are our clients. So if there's any good suggestion that can help the athletes, we'll be happy to accept them. Well, we're worried that you do the wrong thing, with the best of intentions. From 9 a.m. this morning, we have been focusing on one theme. That is, the HAB is giving you tens of millions of dollars of public funds, and you have the authority to discharge your duties. But as in the case of case one, a lot of the injustice have been, reviewed. And Mr. Leung asked a question about review and whether. So we're looking at all these issues from the value for money angle. The ICAC promulgated the BRP in 2011, and the report shows that there are some inadequacies, in the way you operate. Mr. Cheng said that you will, improve, but you have to first know where are your inadequacies. For example, in your organization, first of all, you have the NSAs. NSAs will go up to the SFOC. And using case one as an example, I think case one highlighted the many problems which exist within your organization. So we spent such a long time, we're just trying to find out the facts. Do you understand? We've already agreed and undertaken to look up all the information for members so that it would be so that we would be accountable to the athletes. Like Mr. Lam who said that for the athlete by the name of Falk, I think his best performance was made in 2017, 2018, but that was not, not taken into consideration, and it's not fair to him. So we would like to, identify the reason here. If you have to spend $25 million to make improvements, I think you have to know, we need to know which are the areas which have gone wrong. If you don't mind, I have two other questions regarding case one. Early in your answer given earlier, we heard that in 2017 there was a review, and since the NSA did not provide any fresh, performance, details, Mr. Lam already asked whether or not the performance was based on ranking or the timing. So for the review in 2017, in which month was that review done? Mr. Chang. Chairman, I don't have the information offhand, but it was very close to the time we announced the results. Once we published the results, the Swimming Association immediately submitted, wrote to us, and then we notified the review committee, and we will reply to the Swimming Association immediately after the review committee has made a decision. We can certainly provide members with the details after the meeting. Now, another area which about case one is that, as we read in the remark for case one, was that there was no record regarding, I think the HAB tried to provide details in lecture, but they didn't have the records. So is it an area that you think doesn't warrant our concern? So I don't understand the. You're talking about the absence of minutes of meetings. So you did not accept the additional information, the updated information regarding the athlete's performance, and you have no records and so on. We've undertaken to look up all the details regarding the whole incident. Regarding the audit comment on case one, namely 4D, I think you can answer that question if you refer to 4D and give us an answer. which page? Page 28 of the Chinese version. There's a remark on page 29. Page 28. The audit comment. Page 26 of the Chinese version. 4D. Page 26 of the Chinese version. 4D. You know, according to the minutes, paragraph 4D. We will certainly go back and check in respect of this particular matter. When you attend a public hearing, I think it will be best if you could, you know, better prepare the papers. Paul, thank you. Tanya, can you wrap up now? Chairman, I'd like to, you know, follow up on Mr. Chair's question regarding the review. According to your Articles of Association, Section 53 said participation at international multi-sports games. Part 3, it's about the International Selection Committee for International Events, and at the back, at the end, you say that if there are any complaints or disputes regarding the composition of the delegation, then there could be an appeal. We've just heard that the selection committee and the review committee are comprised of the same people. We also know that the appeal, I think appeal is provided for in the Article of Association. And the article lists the composition of the committee. The chairman is Mr. Falk. I'd like to ask about the review committee. Has it ever appeared in the Articles of Association? And also for the appeals panel, what are the procedures governing its operation? The terms of reference of the appeals panel, it's clearly, you know, listed. Number one, to deal with and to hear all appeals relating to international multi-sports games and related issues, and secondly, and to provide a full account to the board. So since you have an appeals mechanism, do you have procedures? Although that committee has never met. So he's asking you about whether in your memorandum of association, do you have such a clause?
And
second, for the review process and appeal, do you have any guidelines and other thing related? I have at hand the Articles of Association. So for our Articles of Association, that was from 2017. That there's no reference in AOA to the appeal panel, but there's no reference to the review board. So there's reference to the appeal, not the review. So the panel that Mr. Fox sits on is the appeal panel. The procedures of the appeal panel, has this procedure ever been formulated? As far as I could recall, we haven't formulated a procedure. So it's something in the AOA, the appeal mechanism, but there is no procedure formulated for this appeal panel. Do you even care about this appeal panel? We have this mechanism. If there is if an appeal comes along, then we will do something. Does Mr. Falk attend every single hearing, attend every meeting for board of member meetings? Yes, Mr. Falk attends every single meeting of the board of members. Then there has to be an item during these board of officer meetings. We have never received any appeal cases. You have never received appeal panel cases. You don't even have a procedure for receiving an appeal case. Do you even care? Are you really committed about the appeal panel? Are you just assuming you can take care of everything in the review stage? Then, for you, is there a difference between a review and appeal? For appeal, all NSAs are aware of the mechanism. For this new AOA, the AOA has to be passed at the annual general meeting of the NSAs. So the NSAs are aware that if there's a need, they can write to the SFOC. What's the procedure? What kind of documents do you have to submit? When did you have to get the documents in? Like, we know nothing about the procedure. Then how can they even get started with the appeal mechanism? We don't have a detailed procedure for the appeal mechanism. Then you should be working on it. If members believe that we should work on the procedure, then we will add the procedure. It will be more detailed. Chair, I'm not trying to make life difficult for you. The appeal mechanism is referenced in your articles of association. Review. We know there is an appeal mechanism, but there's no reference to the review mechanism. Even in these papers or information available on the internet, we see this international multi-sports appeal panel, but there's no reference to the review panel or anything along those lines. We see this reference to the non-standing committee working groups covering the various international multi-sports game selection committee. And that's the panel that Mr. Wong, you here sit on. We see reference to the appeal panel, but we don't see any reference to the review panel. Is there a can you give us a copy of the procedure for the review panel for our reference? We spent this morning talking about case 1, so we see all these flaws, and then we eventually come back to the articles of association. If you're not clear at this point, you should check with your legal advisor. There has to be appeal panel procedure in place. If you don't even have a procedure, then we will talk about that in our report. If you have other procedures for like review, then you should really give us. We hope that you can have in place a fair, transparent mechanism, because you're using public funds, then you have to be accountable. The HAB has been very nice with you. They haven't taken any follow-up actions in the past. They have given you a huge amount of leeway in the past and time. I think you should make good use of your leeway or the discretion and work on these areas for improvement. Otherwise, you'll be held to account and will be asked why you should deserve so much public funds. Chair, I'm not trying to make life harder for him, but I checked this AOA and the bylaws. I checked everything. There's no reference to the review mechanism. That's why I raised my follow-up questions. Just to round up, to follow up on Chairman's question, a question for the Home Affairs Bureau. I know you're still discussing with the SFOC for the funding of $5 million per year for 5 years. Do you believe that leaving everything to the SFOC, hiring people to look at their procedures and stuff, and having them look at all these NSA, are you confident that you can fix these problems? Look at this best practice review has been published for 9 years. And there are so many number of seminars have been held. There have been seminars for how companies should go about the best reference. There have been so many seminars. We have seen documents, bureaus and LCSC, director of LCSC, they came up here and gave us an account of everything. 9 years have passed, and we're left with all these problems. My question to Secretary for Home Affairs and Commissioner for Sport, is it really a good idea to let SFOC do this job? Because they're the one being reviewed, but they are taking part in this, and they also took a part the whole part in compiling this best practice review. Is it really a good idea to leave it to this SFNOC? Of course, the SFOC should have their own internal audit unit. Is this a good idea, or is it the most appropriate, most effective arrangement to let the SFOC do this? Secretary, we're looking at this from the perspective of value for money. You're giving SFOC $5 billion per year for 5 years, so $25 million per year. You should address that question raised by Ms. Tanya Chen. Chair, I want to thank you for your question. As Ms. Tanya Chen mentioned, in terms of enhancing the standards of governance, we have put in a lot of effort. There's room for improvement for sure. So for the new funding, we're not just giving the SFOC more money. There's more. For the time-limited funding, $5 million per year, there has to be a dedicated working group overseeing everything. Here's the concept. We were giving the SFOC more money to enhance their manpower and operation. And for NSAs, steps will be taken to do something about them. But there's more. Can we make sure we have the right professionals with more money? And for manpower, maybe need to hire people to review SFOC for more problems. And since this organization is supposed to be incorporated under the company's audience, these are things we will be working on in the next 5 years. At the meeting today, many members have been talking about the operation procedure and transparency. We talked about ways to enhance our operation so that in terms of communication or operation, or after a certain event, how do we minimize the misunderstanding? These are things we want to be working on with the time-limited funding for the next 5 years. That's all from me, Chair. Chairman, straightforward question from me. Shouldn't we have in place this requirement for SFOC? Every year, they should be required to sign a subvention agreement and meet all these requirements set out in the best practice reference. Shouldn't we be including the best practice reference as part of the subvention agreement? This is for monitoring purposes. Have you given thought to incorporating these BPR as part of the requirements in the subvention agreement? For the subvention agreement, you should have an agreement in place. They're saying that they will have it. I'm talking about the best practice reference from ICAC. Can you be more specific? There's a subvention agreement involving the SFOC and the management company, MCOHL, Sports Commission for Sport. When the best practice reference was compiled, the target was the NSAs. We were trying to encourage them to adopt these best practice references. As to whether we incorporate the best practice reference in the subvention agreements, we will look into that. But you have been encouraging them to do this for 9 years. You're stepping up the fundings for these organizations from $20 million to just over $40 million. You also have the performance indicators and pledges. You should have these performance indicators. That's how you can measure whether they are delivering with the money. And maybe we will hand this matter to panels for this further discussion. I checked the minutes. 14th December 2012, the Secretary for Home Affairs in his reply said the authorities also provide something from the ICAC. It was something designed for the SFOC and NSAs. It was a best practice reference for reference and adoption by NSAs. So does that mean the best practice reference should also cover the SFOC? Is that correct? Commissioner for Sports. back then, when this best practice reference was made, the target was primarily the NSAs, but there was no specific reference to SFOC, because the SFOC plays a different role from the NSAs. But the SFOC back then also agreed to make reference to the requirements in the best practice reference to make improvements. So we have been encouraging them to adopt the improvement measures. We should be wrapping up our meeting now. Mr. Wong and Mr. Cheng and the officials, I hope you can have a look at the next few chapters in the audit report, because we will maybe talking about them. We haven't even got started. So we talked about this particular case that was discussed by Mr. Lam. He highlighted the problem. Maybe going forward, we may go into greater depth about the governance. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you. Everyone.